Hey everyone, we'll give a few minutes for people to join up and then we'll get started. And if you're subbing in, just speak up. Because I know Tim's out, but I believe somebody from F5 is going to sub in.
Yeah, I'm here for Tim. This is
Okay.
Paul.
Paul, okay.
Yeah, he sent an email yesterday.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I just didn't remember who.
No problem.
All right, I think we're pretty close to being able to get started here. We'll just give it 2 more minutes.
Perfect.
While we're waiting, does anyone have agenda items either for today or the next couple of weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
So the SmartNIC Summit coming up and the speakers. We've got an agenda and we know what topics we want to talk about, but I don't have yet nailed down who's speaking and who's creating the content.
Okay. All right, any other topics?
Is Streeter on? He might be able to give us a real quick rundown of the lab. If not, I can talk about what happened there.
I can share the updates.
All right. That'll work. All right, let's start with the lab update. And we'll go real quick. You want to share or just talk?
No, I'll just talk. Yeah. Okay. So the LF legal is still reviewing the agreement provided by Hurricane Electric, right? And one of the like a point of bone of contention, like a discussion that's happening is around how much of liability that LF should have, especially representing the project, right? And Hurricane Electric cannot limit the liability issue, and LF wants it to be limited. So that's a current discussion from the agreement point of view that's happening. It may take more time. I believe it may not happen in a week or so. Unless this agreement gets done, we cannot take the next step. As even Venkat was mentioning, even we cannot start ordering the initial equipments that we can get it shipped quickly to the lab.
Right.
Okay. So this is the kind of a like a roadblock, I can say, but I think it will be resolved soon. We are trying to get explanation, the reasoning why, and also considering the kind of insurance that we have, what kind of liability we can take up, and all those things. So legal teams are reviewing for now. Let's see. I think maybe by next week we should have some kind of resolution.
Okay. I'll put estimate as 2 weeks. All right. Any other questions or comments on that?
Yeah, all the details, the MSA, the reviews, changes suggested by LF Legal, all the details are shared with the lab oversight committee, with all the members.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. And did we talk about bringing the lab oversight committee as a formal subgroup? Working group?
We haven't.
In either of the previous 2 meetings? Because Tim and I had discussed that before I left. I think there's some merit to it. I mean, we've effectively been running it that way, but I'd like to hear opinions. Their arguments are for, on the other side as well. We don't really need that because we already have the developer platform group, which basically should deal with the lab. That's another approach we could take. Thoughts, input on that?
Yeah, just quickly, there's a subset of the lab people that have access to the confidential information, which is a different group of people than what's in the POC developer platform working group. And
Okay.
so I think that's something that's worth considering.
They'll consider making them a formal working group.
Correct. Or at least formalize who should have access to this confidential information.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's those that are on the working group, the lab one and or POC should be able to have access to it. The board, the TSC should all have access to that confidential information. We put it confidential so it doesn't get out to the public. So it's not confidential from members here, but confidential from the general public, I believe. Sridhar, tell me if I'm wrong there.
No, yeah, you're right.
Okay. All right, so I guess I should talk to Venkat and see if he wants to put together a formal proposal. I mean, it's not a big deal, but put a proposal in front of the board. And I mean, I think it's okay. Anybody think it's a bad idea? For any reason at all, speak up, because otherwise I'm going to push that forward.
I don't know.
Even devil's advocate.
Yeah, devil's advocate says we don't need it. Devil's advocate says we've already got a group, POC dev group, that does this kind of work, and it just so happens that. But what in reality, it's a different group of people than that group of people that are working on the lab. But it doesn't. That's my devil's advocate.
Right.
No need to create bureaucracy when we don't need it.
Yeah, but we haven't actually been operating that way, right? We've been operating more like it's a separate working group, so we can change the way we operate. But I agree, that's the obvious devil's advocate position. All right. Okay. So I'm going to suggest that we make it a formal group. We're going to need to vote on this before we go to the TSC. So we need to vote on the idea of doing that probably next week, or let's see, Sridhar, when is the next board meeting?
8th of May.
All right, let me look at the calendar. 8th of May. Yeah, that means we need to vote on it next week.
Oh, no. So see, if this working group is under the TSC, then it's okay. We don't have to get the approval from the board. We can just notify them. But if it's under the board, then we may it has to maybe it may need some kind of changes also in charter. But if it's within the TSC, it should be okay, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I assume we should consider this under the TSC, and then we just need to inform the board. All right, so we'll do,
Yes.
and that would be on the May 4th meeting. All right. Do not form. Do not need. Okay. All right. So let that sink in, and we'll vote on it next time. All right. Smart Nick Summit.
Smart Nix Summit. So we have an agenda. We've got Joe is the moderator for that agenda. He'll be doing an introduction, why you should care about standardization for DPUs. What is it? What is OPI doing in this space? The second one that we have is OPI use cases, solutions, and requirements. Venkat is going to lead that one. The second presentation is on lifecycle provisioning of DPUs. And pending travel, Boris is slated for that, but we haven't heard. Joe, with you being out, I hadn't heard if you were successful in getting travel booked for that or not.
So we're still, I need to close that today or tomorrow, now that I'm back.
Perfect. As you just let me know as you do, so we can. And again, we had also the third presentation was the API working group, so DPUs and APIs for networking and storage with Mark.
Yep.
And there was a suggestion, I think it was last week, that that's makes it a really Dell heavy event, but that's it's the Dell folks putting in.
So on the lifecycle and provisioning, who else would be willing to step up?
We asked that last week, and I didn't get an answer from anybody.
Okay, and the same thing on the API.
Yep. And it could be that they're presented by more than one person, each of these.
That's also true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which would make sense. And then on the proof of concepts session 4, we had Murcha was looking to speak at that one.
Okay.
And then we had a presentation number 5, which was, what is OPI going to do for me? So kind of a future looking session, more high level. It's possible that it would be Rob Sherwood and maybe John Kim as well.
Okay.
And maybe a Marvell speaker. We hadn't narrowed in on that.
Oh, I have a substitution for Rob. Rob is going to be back in Turkey.
Oh, you'll be back in Turkey. Okay.
Yes. So Deb Chatterjee, I'll send you over Slack the last name, but Deb,
Perfect.
Okay.
DEB. Yeah.
All right.
And,
go ahead,
and
Dan.
bio and all that good stuff if you've got it.
Absolutely. I'll get that.
Thank you.
Okay, and so to close this out, put a email with exactly what you just said, Paul, into the mailing list, the general mailing list, and into the general Slack chat. Okay, and
Okay, I'll do that again.
Yeah, flag that here, and then I'll come in and reinforce it at here as well. So we'll light up people's notification board.
Got it.
And then maybe tomorrow we're going to spend texting people and, twisting some arms.
Good enough.
Okay.
That would be good.
Right.
As I said, bios and headshots, I thought of another agenda topic, which is for the website, I need everybody on the TSC. I need a bio, a headshot, and your social media links that you want, that you would want published on the website. So I have some of those, but I need the rest of them. So I need Dan's, I need Prasoon's, Tim Michaels, I need Tazi's. I need a headshot and social media from Venkat. I need Steve Royer's, Dong Wei's. Joe, I've got yours.
Mhm.
And I've got Richard Wu's. And I need Songming.
Yeah.
I need that. It's not a, gosh, we have to have it tomorrow, but the LF brand team is working on the website, and having content rather than placeholders makes it better to look at when we're reviewing the design. So if you would send that to me, that would be great. Slack, email, and I've sent emails and I've sent Slacks about this to everybody as well.
Right. Okay. All right. Anything else? Any questions? Any other volunteers? All right. All right. Now, Dash engagement. So, I read the minutes. I didn't get a chance to watch the videos, but I read the minutes. And my understanding is that there wasn't much time for discussion. I chatted with Tim a little bit. There wasn't a lot of time for discussion on Dash after the presentation. So, okay. If no one has any other topics, let's just do an open discussion, and we'll just stop when we're done on brainstorming about and taking suggestions on how to work with, integrate with, cross-reference, cross-use Dash, right? Because it covers a somewhat different space than we've been covering. There are some overlaps, which we could go negotiate. Hey, let's divide up, the universe, and that cuts the work down on everyone, and then everyone gets more at the end. So, thoughts and opinions and wild ideas on what to do with Dash. The wildest one completely is we asked Dash to join OPI, the way that IPDK has joined OPI, or we, somehow, go adjacent to Dash, or some, we go under Dash in some fashion. I think those are completely ridiculous, by the way, but let's talk. Okay. So Murchia, you're first, and then Dan Daly.
Yes. So regarding Dash, so it's a subset of the OPI APIs because it's covering mostly the data center use case, and others are being added, and OPI is trying to resolve much more. But on the other hand, Dash at this moment solves few problems that OPI also has. It's like it runs, let's say, only on the DPU. Then it has a Debian image that it's same across all vendors. And basically you get a DPU which runs Sonic. Yeah, because that's the thing with Dash. All the DPUs are gonna run Sonic, which gives you a platform to put containers with different apps, same like Sonic does. So you have a base OS, you have some containers with whatever Dash is doing, yeah, their business, let's say. But that gives OPI ability to insert their containers with other functionalities that are extended on top of Dash. So I think it's not about adopting Dash, it's mostly about adopting Sonic, because that will be the big ticket item for OPI.
Well, except that that's an interesting point of view. So I agree with you mostly, except I think that to use Dash, you have to use Sonic, but Dash is an additional set of APIs for configuring DPUs for both FastPath and configuring those FastPath functions primarily for cloud gateway type.
Yes, but it mandates to run Sonic on the DPU. Because
Let's say, yeah. So
yes.
to use Dash, you have to adopt Sonic, but Dash isn't, it isn't. So adopting Sonic doesn't mean we'd have to adopt Dash. We could do that independently.
This is what I'm saying. I think the biggest item will be to adopt Sonic and get all the running only on the DPU, getting the image, getting all this. And then Dash, it's one of the containers that provides a set of API, but maybe we don't want to conflict with that. And then we have our containers with our APIs running on top of the Sonic image that is already, because this solves a lot of problem from vendors of supporting different images. Because I think the way they deploy containers, the way they deploy the image, Sonic solves some of the problems we are trying to solve. Now, I don't know if there is any
we don't
clash between our vision and their vision.
Yeah, so I don't think that being forced to adopt ONI is the best idea for managing DPUs in general, right? We've shied away from adopting ONI for the initial boot up and deployment, and then Sonic in and of itself doesn't really have a container deployment model, to my understanding. It doesn't have a formalized framework. You can launch it in whatever, direct. You basically launch them directly. So Mark has a lot of information there, but I get your so good way to kick off, Murcia. Anything else before we go to Dan and then Mark and then Stephen?
No, that's also the only thing that I want to make the distinction. Mostly it's about Sonic, not necessarily Dash.
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
What I was going to say is that I think that Sonic has something that we don't currently have in OPI, which is they have a user, a buyer, let's say, who is saying, if you build it and following this specification, I am going to have choice amongst multiple vendors, and I'm going to buy one, right? I may pick a couple vendors actually, and buy something, and I think that is a complete loop, of where the users are motivated, the vendors are motivated. We're motivated to work together. We're motivated to compete on try to make the playing field as maybe not even, but as illustrative as possible of all of our strengths, and get as much value out of our components as possible. And that worked really well with Sonic. I think it's going to work very well for Dash, and I think that this is the piece that we are severely missing here in OPI. Thus far we've been very vendor driven, vendor at different layers of the sort of component stack. And so I'd like to at some point within the TSC have some discussion around how do we motivate users to come to OPI with their problems and say, hey, if you build this thing and you're able to do it with multiple vendors offering this thing, I will buy it. And I do know of users out there who were looking for exactly that. But for whatever reason, they haven't come to us, to OPI, with their problems or with their, almost like their RFIs to say, hey, this is what I want, and I want it to be multi-vendor, and I will buy it.
Right. Yeah, good points. All right, so we'll put that as a future TSC discussion, maybe next week if we can. So part of the problem we have is a bootstrap problem, because we all know that Dash was bootstrapped by Microsoft for Microsoft. I mean, that's public information. They've said that in the Dash community. And so that means the consumer is driving the API definition and specification, which, you know, people see as a business opportunity, obviously, right? I'm trying to state just the obvious public information here. So that is, and OPI, because we're formed out of DPU vendors plus software plus system solution plus server vendors, has a little bit of a, you know, again, as you say, we're kind of coming bottoms up as opposed to top down, and we're saying what set of APIs and specifications do we have to write, and what toolkits do we have to adopt to build common approach to software for DPUs. And so yeah, okay, so we do need to address that directly. I agree. So this is all right. Mark.
So my opinion on this is that we leverage what we can from Dash. I think Sonic is a OS environment that we need to consider as an element, right? Because we've talked about this within the API group about, we've got the APIs, we've got the definitions of what the protobufs and the different messaging and configuration frameworks look like. We've also discussed the ability to be able to place in different network OS environments for doing the offload and the configuration operations. So it's really a matter of leveraging and utilizing that as a component, but we don't want to eliminate the ability to use, for example, OpenShift or Kubernetes or some of the other OVS, OVN type of solutions that are out there, because we want to make this, again, multi-vendor across the different solutions.
Right. Do you think that we have figured things out that Dash ought use? I mean, certainly the all of the boot stuff we're doing, you know, the DPU bring up and DPU operation inside of the hosting system is an important one, especially when you're deploying the DPUs as PCI cards.
Yeah, that's an important aspect. And you also have to look at the fact that you've got a couple of different phases. You've got the initial provisioning phase, right? So you've got basically a virgin card that you have.
Is it my dropout or did everyone lose?
No, I think I lost him too. So
okay, so we'll come back to him when he comes back on. So Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Mark covered a lot of my points, but I just want to add, you know, I feel like adding Sonic as a, you know, sort of an option, I think makes sense, right? Making sure that that is something that can be supported with OPI. But making Sonic the only option is a definite no-go for Red Hat. Because that precludes things like OpenShift.
yeah.
That's a good point. Murcia, you're up again.
Yeah, so another point I wanted to make, it's about SAI. So from vendor perspective, and you know, we have a bunch of vendors here, I don't want to necessarily speak for them, but they already implement the SAI layer for exposing certain functionality to the hardware. So maybe OPI can adopt the SI as an underneath layer on top of which we implement our own APIs. But we use SI as an interface, and multiple network operating systems are using SI today. So maybe this could be another angle of research.
Does anyone know, has SI been used with OVS OVN for the underlying switch configuration ever? Has anybody ever looked at, hey, let's take OVS OVN, let's use SI to the hardware?
We do that. Yeah. We for converting from the OVS DB, the Linux aspects of OVN, OVS, we convert that to SI.
And you have, is that a formal part of IPDK?
Yeah, yeah. It's released already. We released it in 2301. Yeah.
And could we so we could promote, excuse me. I apologize. We could promote that to be a general API approach. So we could take that IPDK approach and make it a general API approach. Correct, Dan?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah.
Okay, so that's this.
So it aligns the, you know, let's call it the fixed function part of the OVN OVS pipeline, and then, you know, the flow-based path, you know, you can do through OpenFlow or through P4, and so that's those are the patches that we did to underneath OVS to be able to you know, connect the Linux kernel to SI.
Okay. All right. So we should do a evaluation of that for the common way we use integrate OVS OVN on top of DPUs. Then we can say, hey, DPU vendors, give us SI in all cases. Now we can put Sonic on top of there, or OVS OVN equivalently, and we can do it in a common way, right? But there's obviously some evaluation needed, but that, I think that's worth exploring. That's a good outcome from this.
Yeah, that's why we did it, because we knew we'd have to support both. So we we knew how to link the Linux kernel to the ASIC with SI, and so we just we copy and pasted it from Sonic into the OVS environment.
Yeah, good. All right, so evaluate moving this API. Okay. All right, Murchie, you're up again. Unless you just left your hand up. Yeah, and Mark lost his network. He got stomped on. I don't know if he's back.
I just hopefully made it back. I don't know.
All right. So did you follow those last couple of points about common SI and IPDK already has it? So a common SI across Sonic and OVS OVN, and we also have the notion of you know, Sonic is one approach, and if you use Sonic, you can use Dash, and then the OVS OVN is another approach, which I know you've been exploring in the API working group.
Yep, and we've got Kubernetes being explored.
Yeah, for me, Kubernetes is completely parallel.
Yep.
Networking stack, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And, you know, I guess Kubernetes doesn't affect the Dash Cloud Gateway, you know, tunnel termination APIs in any particular direction. It also doesn't affect the loading of the pipelines in any direction, which is a hybrid from Sonic and, you know, a few new pieces that Dash has added, to my understanding. Is that a fair assessment?
It depends. If you're offloading anything inside of Kubernetes, then you need to add the pipeline elements of that offload to the underlying networking offloads that may also exist. So there's a cohabitation problem that gets created because you have these snippets of pipeline that need to be sequenced.
Yeah, you have to do a linkage of the pipeline into the Kubernetes CNI or whatever the tie-in would be. Right, Dan?
Yeah, exactly.
So there is a Kubernetes interaction of components that we have to worry about if we're going to say, hey, go use Dash in the following way. We need to write up what that interaction is and how to use it, correct?
Yeah. Simple example is, let's say you have a Kubernetes load balancer that's load balancing across containers on some other system over a tunnel. Maybe that tunnel was created by Dash or by Psi, but then Kubernetes needs to be able to know that in order to get to that container, they have to push it through the tunnel, stuff like that.
Okay. All right, anyone else? So I think this is and then for what we could offer to Dash, I think the Kubernetes work, the lifecycle and provisioning work, the all of the lifecycle and provisioning work, if we could get commonality there, it would benefit everyone, including Dash, including OPI, including, all of our software developers and all of our downstream consumers.
I think Boris identified in the provisioning group a very specific ad, which I don't think we have anyone implementing the code for, but I think it would be like a really good, like, OPI contributed this to you, Microsoft, which is to have SCTP, which is something we've already ratified as a boot option for inside ONI. And this feels like it would be sort of token, but I think it would be a good start to say, hey, you know, this is a really valuable thing that would be in your ecosystem.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing we want to start with. Something not too big, very concrete, where we can articulate the advantage. Dash within. Okay, so we need to dig into that. I'll talk to Boris about that one. Okay, anything else? And it's sparse enough you can just speak up. Yeah, so I think this is something we need to take on. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to, obviously Dash is going to exist. It already does. And, if we want OPI to be relevant, we have to work that out. SNIA doesn't have any standards it's pushing. Right now, it's mostly definition, education, and that sort of thing. So there's probably an outreach group overlap. But SNIA, other than talking about the compute memory storage as a unified whole, and there's a SNIA group for that, and maybe some of the boot interactions and so on can contribute to that part, but we'll have to see.
What will be the logistics of interacting with Dash? Will someone here be assigned to be kind of a liaison to do that right off the bat, or
we should pick one of the TSC members to be the liaison to work with to work with.
Christina or
Probably,
Gerald or
yeah, we probably, I mean, at the board level, we should probably go work with Gerald. And then at the working level, we coordinate through Christina more. So Gerald DeGrasse and Christina Moore. So we need a let me do we want to run this? All right, so mechanically, how do you want to do this? Do we want to have a do you want to, Paul, do you want to schedule an internal meeting on Dash outreach and, you know, spam it to everyone and see who shows up and see if we get a volunteer?
Sure.
Okay. So why don't we set a call, or we could use the outreach committee call or half of that, because again, it's only going to take 20 minutes. We could use an agenda slot in the outreach committee meeting. Although I don't, again, not sure. Anyway, think about that, and maybe you could reach out. Also, maybe you want to reach out to Christina and say, hey, after that presentation, you know, we want to, you know, we think there's some opportunities and we want to talk to you about them in a week, in a couple of weeks. So get that on the books. And then next week, let's get together and talk about who should do what to who to make that actually happen. Yeah, let's do that.
Got it. So 2 action items for me: reach out to Christina, let her know where we're at. Second action item is to set up a internal meeting or outreach.
All right. Any objections to that approach? All right.
And as I reach out to Christina, do you want me to talk about the fact that we mentioned SCTP as a contribution we could make to as a suggestion, or just
say
coming?
No, just leave it a little vaguer than that and say we think we have, you know, we think there's an opportunity to work together and go from there. In particular, in, you know, Psi, well, you could say things like DPU behavior on the inside of a hosting server, Psi, common Psi, common pipeline loading, and secure ZTP as examples, something like that. Okay, something like that. All right. Anything else? Okay, good discussion. And yeah, I don't know if we need a one-off, Dan, for talking about pulling the IPDK Psi for OVS OVN interface in, or maybe that can come up in the API working group as an idea, because I think that would be very useful, actually.
yeah, the other thing that we did is made it so that Psi can coexist with these flow-based interfaces like OpenFlow and P4. So that might be something that we could we've talked to Microsoft about before. There's a related project called Pins, which is sort of the inverse of that, which is to be able to use is to translate P4 into Psi.
Yeah.
And what we do in IPDK is the opposite. It's below Psi, so that Psi and P4 can coexist into the same SDK. So it's different from Pins, but it's in the same ballpark of how do you have fixed function Linux and Sonic type pipelines coexist with with P4, and they're doing a lot of definition in Dash with P4, and everything is very flow based. You know, they're very connections per second focused. So I think that this is another piece that could be valuable to Dash. We certainly use it to make all that stuff work today. So another thing to bring up. But I definitely want to get to that other discussion of sort of like, hey, how do we create a flow, like a value generating flow, where maybe Microsoft is one of our first customers to say like, hey, you know, Microsoft, these are the things that we're adding to make it easier for you to have multiple vendors, or easier for you to X, Y, and Z. We just have to figure out how we add that value.
Yeah, good. Would you be willing to review that in one of the next couple of calls?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, can you do it next week? Or do you,
I'm traveling next week. I'll be on the call, but I'm traveling all next week, so maybe in 2 weeks.
slot you for the 11th then?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, let's get that out. Yeah, because I think, you know, that's something we would want to vote on. It's something where we're cross-contributing IPDK back into OPI, which is good. It gives us more common ways to do it. But again, we're going to have to see, you know, again, we got to do the evaluation and see if it's sensible in the end. It sounds promising. So, you know, I'm enthusiastic, even though I don't sound it. I don't sound it because I've been coughing my lungs out for 2 days. Airplanes are terrible. So, all right. Any other topic at all? Otherwise, I'll close the call. All right, hearing none. Thank you for your time. Excellent discussion. We have the notes here. If you have additional notes or comments, you can just add it, you know, start another little section and add it to the end of the list, and we'll go from there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.